Good evening. Welcome to the November 15 meeting of Tri-Town. I'm glad to host here in Stow tonight. I will just point out that anybody in the house, please take advantage of, we certainly can't match the hospitality of Nashoba Regional when they ran out there.
Yeah, but who can?
Spread, but who can, that's right. But we have donated by Honey Pot Hill Orchards tonight, some of their fresh cider over there. And cookies courtesy of Gwen Burke, Brian Burke's daughter. She wants to open her own baking business, and she creates wonderful cakes and cookies, and she has created these for us tonight, so please help yourself. You can do so without being right focus of camera, because I've moved them over there. I'd like to, as we normally do, just go around the room. We have one or two new faces, and just go around, starting on my left, and then around this way, and we'll come back around the table.
Good evening, I'm Stan Starr, Chairman of the Board in Lancaster.
Rob Frieswick, Interim Facilities Director, Nashoba Regional.
Brooke Clenchy, Superintendent of Schools.
Lorraine Ramasco, Bolton School Committee Rep and Chair of the School Committee.
Don Lowe, Bolton Town Administrator.
Brian Boyle, Bolton Advisory Committee.
Kathy Cody, Lancaster Rep, School Committee.
Steve Rubenstein, Stow Representative on the School Committee.
Ted Kirshner, Bolton Advisory.
Bob Sikansky, Bolton Selectman.
Stan Wysocki, Bolton Selectman.
And Don Hawkes, Stow Selectman. And I would just like to congratulate Bob. He's,
Thank you.
What is it, not quite 24 hours or something yet?
It's
long?
been just over a week, right?
Oh, a week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Seasoned.
Well, are you considering
A
retiring?
little less than a year.
Oh, welcome
Thank you.
to the other side of the firing line. With that said, we have not a lengthy agenda, but I'm sure that it will be meaningful. And we have handouts if anyone did not receive them. Brooke had some additional ones, 2 sheets, and I think her items are going to lead us off. So as she's handing them out, I will ask her to proceed with the report.
Sure, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here. I thank you so much. And actually, I've had the wonderful experience of tasting other of Gwen's fine baked goods. They are delicious always. She does a fabulous job. I also tonight want to just introduce again Rob Frieswick behind me, who is our new Interim Director of Facilities. Rob comes from within our organization. He actually helped to oversee our grounds department. We went through quite a lengthy process to find who we felt was just the right fit for this position, and he stepped up to the plate, and we are thrilled to have him. So he's come tonight because he will also help to speak to the third item, which is the leach field that I believe, Mr. Hawkes, you put on.
Yes.
So I'm just going to quickly go through a couple of items. It's kind of always a challenge to go through and say, okay, what are some key things that I think that you'd like to know? So the staffing, as I mentioned, Rob is behind me. We also have our last leadership staffing in place now with Lisa Brolko-Bicky, who is our nurse leader, and those were our 2 final positions to fill for this current school year. So we're thrilled to have both Rob and Lisa on docket with us. Our budget, I'm not going to read through this, I'm just going to speak to each of these. We continue to work on our budget process. We actually started this summer with our principals. Pat Maroney, of course, leads the charge with that. She works with her office with Michelle Cody. We take a very extensive process throughout this time period. So for example, Pat has had at least 1 meeting, if not 2 or 3, with each one of our principals, with each one of our center leaders, whether it's facilities, nursing, extended learning, food services, teaching and learning, SPAD, all of that. She meets with every one of those people and works through our ITs. Another example, of course, our technology department. So she meets with each one of them. We kind of take a look. We're hoping to have, anticipate having kind of a placeholder number early December. That's our goal right now, but we would not want you to take a whole lot of stock in that number, so I'm putting that out there as a disclaimer right up front, because we all have no idea what our revenue is, just probably the same as you. We'll be waiting for January for the governor's numbers to roll out and such. So what we're creating is really what we're thinking, this is probably what we would like to have, but we know right up front we probably can't have all of that. So, but it's our starting place, just kind of the same approach that we took last year. We'll then also, like last year, on January 20th, we'll have our meeting, our workshop meeting with our school committee. And at that point in time, we'll take the same approach we did last year, which is bring in all of our administrators with all of our school committee members and our central office staff. Everyone is there, and we go through basically item by item in each of the cost centers. So we'll take that same approach again this year, because it worked really, really well for us last year. In the interim, if you were watching and monitoring, and I know that Chairman Ramosko is going to speak to this tonight, the calendar, you'll see that each one of our centers right now is coming in front of the school committee to basically say, here's where we're at this year, these are some of the things that we're anticipating moving into the new year. So it's kind of like a present view and a view to the future, so that will all tie in with the budget process. So this is part and parcel of our extended process. The third item is the Nashoba Regional High School Advisory Committee. Early this year, we struck a committee to kind of take a look at all of the data, and actually Bob Sikansky is here, and he could probably speak to it as well as I could, except that we can't put out the recommendation right now because that has not gone before the school committee. But I think that Bob did a great job leading that group. We had a total of 9 members, 3 members from each one of our communities, and I think we had really rich discussion. I think that would coin it nicely. I think it was rich, it was robust, and we appreciated Bob's leadership on that. So the committee itself now has made a decision of what their recommendation will be, and then they voted to disband because their particular role is now finished, and Bob will be presenting the recommendation to the school committee at the November 29th meeting of the school committee, so stay tuned for that. Now again, just to keep in mind, the only charge of that particular committee was to say whether they would recommend that the school committee move forward with an SOI or not. And that was the only charge, is whether the work that the committee did is it looked at all of the data points and such, looked at that and had to make the decision of whether to suggest that the committee move forward or not. That was their only charge. Town communications is the fourth item. Just to let you know, we continue to meet. Certainly your town administrators and myself continue to meet once a month. We met a little bit more regularly last year and then decided we didn't need to meet quite so often, because the truth is, when any of us have an issue, we call the other one right away. So we really, I think, had kind of moved away from the formality to the informal, and it just works really well for us. So we're all in communication on a pretty regular basis, quite frankly, depending on the situation. So that's continuing to be ongoing, and all 3 town administrators have been attending, and that's just been excellent. The other thing I would say too about town communications is this is really vital for the school district on so many levels. But just 2 examples that come to mind. So for example, in Stow, Jesse came to speak to us the other day about the anticipated project on 117. That was terrific because we were able to bring all of our people into that. Rob also attended that meeting. Michelle Cody, who oversees our buses, was there. Pat Maroney was there. So we were able to bring anybody who might be a stakeholder and have to help support that from the school district's end was there. So it was really, really useful time. It was time very, very well spent. Another example, Bolton, for example, has got a major boiler project going on at Florence Sawyer right now. And so it's nice to have all that communication flowing through us, and so that we kind of all know where we're at. So that continues, from my lens anyway, to be ongoing and really, really productive. Very, very positive communication. The MCAS update. So MCAS was really different this year. And if you were to go back and review some of the older tapes when I first came on, and I know that Lorraine has alluded to this several times with me, because I was incredibly nervous. With the state, it was moving this year to a more mandated CBA, computer-based assessment. And we had not, Nashoba Regional had not piloted it before, so it was brand new to the district. They hadn't piloted Park, which was basically a part of the framework of the new MCAS, so they hadn't done that. So, and that way of thinking around the Park assessment is substantially different than the old MCAS. So they brought the Park in, dovetailed it with MCAS, and used a computer-based platform. So that was kind of a lot of stuff to work through and prep our staff and our students for. What it also meant for our district is we had to make sure that we had all the right technology, the hardware and software, and then we had to be thoughtful and strategic and devising a nice plan for professional development for our teachers and for the students, because you know, it's not like this on your ELA anymore. You have to be able to cut and paste and use different techniques, very specific to the new CBA. So it was a lot of work. So I kept saying, now don't be disappointed if our scores are not where they should be. And the truth is, the test, they would tell you from the state level, is much more difficult than the MCAS 1.0 as opposed to the 2.0 right now. And so between all of that, I think that we had high expectations and we're hoping we were gonna get there, but I just was a nervous Nelly in the background saying, boy, I hope this comes together. And so I sit here tonight saying it went together beautifully. We had no problems with the hardware and the software. We sent our IT teams out to the schools when it was ongoing so that if we had any issues with IT, there was someone there immediately to take care of it. I think our teaching and learning unit worked incredibly closely with our IT unit, and that was incredibly helpful too. And then I think the fact that our teachers worked really, really hard to professionally develop themselves and be prepared. Then we also did trial run. In fact, I remember the day that we did the trial run here in Stow, the power in the entire area went down 2 minutes before the trial run. And I think we were all gonna have a meltdown as we watched it and said, oh my gosh. So needless to say, we did a reschedule and did the trial run, and the trial run went off very, very well. So long story short, our children did very, very well. And what was really particularly impressive to me is some districts that have done particularly well on MCAS 1.0 all these years didn't fare nearly as well as our students did. And yet we didn't have the Park, we didn't have the trial runs, we didn't do a lot of things that a lot of other school districts did. So I think so much credit is deserved, it goes out to our staff, our students, everybody who had a role in making this work. If you go on to the DESE website and you take a look, there's a tab there when you get into accountability, and you're able to go in there and take a look at the actual test scores, and you can see the last, they generally do like a 10-year run. But the one that you're really gonna wanna look at is the growth, and there's scatter graphs that are in there, and you can go and take a look at our growth, and you're gonna see that our students are always in the 4th quadrant, the upper quadrant, which is where you want to be. I can tell you there are a lot of districts in that lower left-hand quadrant. For us to be so high, it is just really, really impressive. So this, to me, was a banner year for our MCAS. I'm super, super proud of that. Ongoing initiatives that I would just mention to you, we continue to put the focus on the early literacy. We are working on a district-wide early literacy program that is K-5, but we've already got our eye on 6, 7, and 8, so we're looking at something across the district so that by the time the kids get into the high school, everybody's talking the same language. And it really kind of helps put some different checks and balances in place, so we're very excited about that. And of course, our math program, the ongoing implementation of the new math series is ongoing as well. This year too, the DESE released new digital learning and computer science standards, and so we're just in the process now of starting to insert those where it makes sense and is appropriate. So those are just a couple of highlights of where we're at right now within the district. So I'm certainly open to any questions you might have. Thoughts, concerns?
We tend not to stand too much on ceremony here. If anyone in the audience, not just exalted table sitters, has any comments, questions, now is the time.
I'm good.
Great.
So ranking
Thank
was in
you.
the top quartile, is that what you,
Our-
has that been done yet?
The rankings, no, the rankings will be like, they're always a year, 2 years behind in rankings, so I'm not sure where this will sit in rankings, but if you were to, for example, like Burlington comes to mind, and I really appreciate Burlington Public Schools, but that's a school that's really been a hallmark for technology, as opposed to, let's say, Nashoba might not be a hallmark for technology at this moment in time, and yet our kids really fared substantially better, you know, and it's those types of things, even though they didn't have everything that Burlington had. I'm not really comparing the two, just other than saying a point of reference, you know, so I think that our students deserve a lot of credit.
So in relation to them, we've done well, that you know, but you don't know the overall rankings amongst Commonwealth or?
Actually, you're able to go in and take a look, when you can actually play with those scatter graphs that I was talking about earlier, and you'll be able to see, like, you can put any district in there and take a look at how you,
But you're,
so,
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you're looking for, are we first, are we 10th, are we 12th?
Yeah,
Are we
that-
25th?
Yeah, I'm looking for a ranking if there was one.
yeah,
but
I
it
don't think
seems
that
like
there's something that's out there at this point in time that I'm aware of, like, I mean, it's not like Boston.com or anything like that. I mean, is that someplace I'd like to look ultimately? Yes, but not at this moment. I think we're well poised though for next year, because the state is bringing on 2 more grade levels next year. And I think everything that we did this year, we need to replicate for that next group of students going into the CBA, because we were so successful this year with it.
Super.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Just for the benefit of those who were here as we did our introductions, we have been joined by Chairman Brian Burke of Stow Board of Selectmen. And you missed the ample kudos to your daughter. And
Oh.
she would received a vote of endorsement from the superintendent because she has sampled some of Glenn's handiwork in the past, so.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hawkes, and I'm not fool enough to not realize that my being here is not nearly as important as my daughter's baking.
But anyway, there's plenty more up there, everyone, please help yourself. We have concluded the first item on the agenda with the superintendent's very well laid out memo, and this is, I think, the second time we've done this. And I think it makes sense to have something similar, because you're gonna have new brush fires, hopefully not too many, and your fire extinguishers will be bigger than the fires. But I think this is a good kicking off point, and I look forward to it
Thank you.
at each of our coming meetings. It's a starting point. I believe our esteemed school committee chair has the second item. Lorraine, come on up.
Thank you. So, obviously, it's a calendar. This is a living, breathing document that the school committee and the superintendent have worked together on. It is gonna it lays the foundation for school committees beyond this one going forward. These items are the most critical ones for us to understand as we start to move towards not just the budget, but how are things working. I'm just gonna point out a couple things just to give you a little bit of background on them. So anytime you're looking for one of our calendars, there are always going to be one in the meeting packets, and they'll be the updated ones. For November is chock full, because we're trying to front load as many discussions and presentations from those folks that report to the superintendent as we can, to understand what their goals are for the upcoming year, what are the kinds of things they're gonna be asking us for, not really getting into the dollars yet, just kind of philosophically where they wanna go. At the next meeting, we will have the annual audit review, and we're also gonna be talking about OPEB. It will be a follow-up meeting, because I think back in October, we had a dedicated meeting to talk about funding OPEB, and we actually had 2 organizations come in and talk to us about setting up a trust, and that's something that the school committee's talked about for a couple of years. So now it's time for us to kind of decide where we want to go and what type of commitment that we want to make on an annual basis. So that follow-up meeting will happen at the November 29th meeting. In December, I think Superintendent Clenchy mentioned to you that we're gonna be looking at the first meeting at a preliminary budget, which is considerably sooner than we normally would have seen it, because in the past, the school committee really wouldn't see the budget until the very end of January, maybe the beginning of February. And that only gave us a month and a half, and you folks a month and a half, to see what was going on, but then, you know, all the discussions and the negotiations within it. So this at least gives us a view of what's coming, what are some of the things that we can start to put numbers to and start to understand the prioritization within the need for the school district. The other thing I want to bring your attention to in December, at our last meeting, the superintendent mentioned that she had someone come in from UMass, from the psychiatry department, and speak to the leadership team about vaping. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because I don't want to get caught up in my knickers, so you might have to come up and help me. But it is an issue. And we asked if we could, the superintendent would bring that specialist back to talk to us about some of this that's going on. We're not bringing this person back because we have a wide scale issue. It is just across every city, every town, every state. It's a massive issue. It's very easy to hide the substance that's in the units that people use. And I think that this is an attempt for us as a school committee to understand it, but also really want to invite parents, anyone, to watch that meeting so they can become informed on what some of the latest issues are within substance abuse arena. Okay, so I want to bring everyone's attention to that. In January, there's a couple of things. The budget workshop, I've sent an email out to the school committee to see if I could move that from the 13th, which is smack dab in the middle of a long weekend, to the 20th. So more to come on that, but I'm hopeful we can move it to the 20th. And then we have asked for a review of employee insurance carriers. So we can take a look at, are we competitive? Where are some of the opportunities? That's a big one for us because, as you know, insurance and benefits are the second biggest cost to the district and every other organization. So we'll be looking at that. The superintendent and the business manager will be looking into it. The other thing is we're bringing Melanson Heath back. Melanson Heath was the organization that did the forensic audit for us almost a full year ago. One of the things, there was extensive findings, and they worked very closely with the business office at the district. And as they started doing their work, and it's been more than a year that they first came, things were shifting and changing. So Pat Maroney was working with the lead investigator for the audit. And as she was working and giving him the information he needed, she was also making tweaks and he was making recommendations. So we're in a good place. But my question to him was, how do we know that we're going to stay in that good place? And he committed to coming back to giving us an update and doing a cursory review to see how are things going? Are we on track? What are some of the other areas we should be looking at? And one of the other things along these lines is that the district, prior to most of us being involved in this effort, had gone through two situations where they were taken into receivership. The current school committee is concerned about that not happening again. So what can we do to put in revised policies and procedures and protocol that is standardized so that the district doesn't find itself in that position 5 to 10 years from now? And one of the things that we're recommending is that we put a line item in the budget and put a third to a fifth of the amount of money that we believe we would need in order to conduct a forensic audit every 3 to 5 years. And just that way we don't have to come up with $50,000. I think we're committed to that. We'll see where it goes. But it certainly is another one of those safeguards that allows us to ensure that we're doing something to protect the district and the towns.
Would you continue to use the same forensic auditors?
If I had my druthers, I wouldn't go anywhere else. And I'll tell you why. I did do a lot of phone calls. I did talk with people who had used forensic auditors. The gentleman that did our forensic audit was the gentleman who had done the forensic audit back in 2002. So he was extremely familiar with the district, which saved us a lot of time and effort. So I would use him for this year. Going forward, I don't know what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years. So this check-in, yes, we want to use that guy. He's very well respected. He did a fabulous job for us. And I will say, without going into a number, he did so much more work for us than we actually contracted with him.
Did that have to go through a bidding process?
No.
Because
Because my understanding is that audits and legal decisions don't have to go through the traditional process. Is that,
yeah, I'm getting a nod in. That's correct. In agreement.
you doubted me?
Stands to trust but verify kind of guy.
So anyway, I just want to let you know, we need to stay committed to this. And, in 5 to 10 years, when some of us aren't here or some of us are here, you need to hold everyone to that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. February, there's again, living, breathing document, second bullet comes out. I'm not going to go into anything more there. And then the only other thing I want to mention to you is we had a discussion on the athletics costs, fees at our last school committee meeting, and our athletic director came in and did a terrific job. She's made a recommendation to increase the per student per sport fee. Right now we pay students pay $150 per sport, per student. And she did a comparison and looked at the numbers at all of the districts in the Midland, Midland and the Wachusett, because there's 2 different leagues, but we're in the Mid-Wach League. And we were very, very low comparatively. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 schools that were lower than us, but there's no comparison to size, demographic, etc. So that discussion will continue, but she's also recommending a family cap, which the district has never had. And I know there's a family in Stow, and the parent has reached out to me a couple of times. She ends up every year spending $1,200 more dollars because she's got so many kids in the district, and it just seems at some point you got to cap it out. And almost all of the other districts do have a cap. So there was a recommendation made for a cap. We're going to go back and talk about that, and we'll come up with that.
Consideration from hardship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kids that are on reduced and free lunches.
Also,
Yeah.
we also see a different rate. In fact, the free, I believe, are free.
Okay. So any other questions for me or
Nope, I'm
on
good.
this or anything else?
This is great.
Okay.
But,
Oh,
just in February,
yep.
your third bullet, staff roundtables, tell me a little bit about. what
So
that is.
this was started about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And the purpose of this is to allow the staff across the district to sit and speak with school committee members. And so what we do is we come up with a list of questions that we want to know. It's a direct line to the folks that are in the schools. There's no hidden reason behind it. It's just to give us a chance to hear what their concerns are, get some feedback from them on some of the initiatives that we're thinking about. And then each school committee member will meet with a large table of folks. We all go through the same questions. We all encourage the dialogue. The school committee members are then responsible for preparing the statements from the folks that sit at their table. We put them all together, we look at them, and then we decide, do we have things here that we need to talk to the superintendent about, get them involved in, issues to resolve, kudos that people need to hear about, whatever it is. But it's a way to extend the communication beyond the school committee into the schools within a structure that the superintendent and administration are involved in. So it's not us versus them, it's inclusive.
Good. Thank you.
All
Any
right.
other questions, comments?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
The only other item here is one that I put on kind of at the last minute, but before the posting. For the benefit of those people who are not, who might be watching this on tape delay. It's entitled Discussion and Department of Environmental Protection Findings, Ray, the District Leach Field location. And I added possible remediation, alternative solutions.
So it is remediation, not mediation, huh?
I have the corrected
Okay.
agenda, which is on the table there, if anybody would like the correct one. Yeah, well, I was gonna say, mediate with DEP, good luck.
That'd be interesting.
But all I know about it basically is what I read in the paper. And sometimes we have excellent reporting, but I like to hear from the people that are in the field, not the leach field in this case, but in the field. So
Sure.
however you'd like to do that.
Actually, if Rob and I can both come to the table, we'd appreciate
Certainly,
that. Thank you.
please do. And while you do that, I'm gonna pass these cookies around, because I know everybody too hesitant to get up here.
At least take them home with you.
I'm gonna pass these.
Sure, I really
Take
want
one,
one.
pass one
Why
around.
don't you
Pass
take that?
one. Give me the other.
So I'll tee this up if I
You
can,
have
and then,
cookies,
feel free to ask now, as we say, Rob has been thrown into the fire quickly. He started, in fact, I just said to him, just think, a week ago, this wasn't even on your radar. And tonight he sits before the 3 Board of Selectmen. So he has really been thrown into the fire here, but I'm sure he's going to do fine. So the leach field, I'm not exactly sure what your question is, and I can just kind of tee it up a little bit, and then maybe if we can go after
Let me ask,
what we've done, the work we've done to date.
a colleague of mine, from a different connection, not a Stow resident, and I were discussing this general subject. And his question to me was, has anyone looked at, if the problem is, and this is where you need to tell me what the problem is, but if the problem is DEP says the location of that leach field, because now they've revised their standards or whatever,
Right, that's correct.
is now technically in danger of polluting the water source for the post office.
Right.
Is that correct? Question was, has anyone looked at an alternative of provided, for the district providing water
Mhm.
to them, rather than could you buy out of the major expense for a much lesser one? Stowe had a similar kind of incident many years ago. With the fire station, our old fire station, which has now been replaced by our wonderful new facility, was built in the literal cellar hole of the old Yale High School, which burned to the ground. And in those days, back in the 50s, I guess they weren't quite as conscientious as it might be today. Obviously, anytime you have a catastrophic fire, you're gonna have stuff in the ground that you shouldn't be having around pump, well areas. But basically, as the apocryphal version of the story was, they scraped out a lot of the old wood and burnt timbers and whatever, and then bulldozed everything else back in the hole and ran the bulldozer over it a few times and poured concrete and built a fire station. It subsequently proved that the church, the Blue Door Church, the house right next door to that building was at the time the parsonage for the Congregational Church. And that well, as I understand the history of it, was contaminated as a result of all of this. And the way they got out of that, or got around it temporarily, matter of fact, we still do it. The town system, which is now centered here, provides water to them, and it's now on a metered basis, but that's just a method of paying for it. So rather than entail massive cleanup of the area so that their own well could be functioning again,
Mhm.
this was an alternative.
Right.
So I think that was kind of the background of the question that I
Mhm.
fielded. So anything you can do to help elucidate on that?
Sure, so, just so that you're aware, you're not the first person that's mentioned that to us, but, so we've actually had that kind of discussion around the table. The other discussion is, of course, and you didn't say this, but you kind of alluded to it, we're not grandfathered into the new state regs that are there,
Right.
which was very disappointing to us, because this was done, of course, all before the new regs
Sure.
came in. And so you're right about the DEP. I mean, we're continually communicating with them. They're also watching as we're deciding whether to put forward an SOI or not. That's also part and parcel of our communication with them. The engineering company that we brought in is called On-Site Engineering. And that's when we were looking at what are some of our alternatives that we can kind of look at here. And they're really evolved from their work to primary. This was not one of them, the suggestion that you're talking about. Two alternatives, and I'll have Rob speak to that in a minute here. But again, if we do a leach field, if we have to do a new leach field, it will basically be really in the back 40, and I'll let Rob speak to that too. There are really even two alternatives for that. There's a long, thin one, or we can look at a little bit different one underneath the upper soccer field. But I'll let Rob speak to that, and then he can kind of tell you what he knows, and then we're either open to further questions, or we'll go back and do some more homework.
Great, thank you.
I spoke with David Fraterno from On-Site Engineering today on, possibly either relocating the well at the post office or, coming up with an alternative source for them. There are two other wellheads that are affected that are within the interim wellhead protection area. One of them being the high school itself, and then I think across the street from the high school. So there's two other sites that are fall under this protection area. So it's a much bigger scope of work to try to relocate that. So unfortunately, that's probably out of the question. Is or finding another water source. We have two basic ways of going about the leach field. One of them would be to upgrade the system we have now to get everything to where we need to be to, for DEP guidelines, to fall into DEP guidelines. It would be a capital project of a range of $75,000 to $125,000. Going down that road, there would be additional testing that we would have to do. And that would be an additional cost of $40,000 to $50,000 a year in testing, on top of the capital, to put the project in.
Annual testing?
Yes.
Annual testing on top of what we already do.
For how many years or forever?
Forever.
Huh.
Or, as long as the leach field is in use.
Yeah.
There's another way we could go about doing it. We could relocate the leach field. There would be some infrastructure changing. I would imagine it'd be a pump system, and they would relocate the leaching field to basically the soccer fields, either part of the upper soccer field or along the tree line in between the upper soccer field and lower soccer field. There's no impact to anybody on Fox Run or the other abutters. And they would design that system to anticipate any additional flows for expanding on the high school. And by doing that, there's no additional testing costs. It's a little bit more for the infrastructure, up front it's $85,000 to $175,000, but there's no additional testing cost after that. And we would, everything is out of that interim wellhead protection area.
The cost delta there is just because of the distance and the piping and the pumping?
Yeah, it's a bigger infrastructure project, so.
Does it impact the use of the field? Can you
If
put the
they-
field back on top of it?
Yeah, if they're, if they decide to go on the upper soccer field, it would be, some disruption there, but, we could
Temporary.
rebuild. Temporary, yeah, it wouldn't be a permanent thing. Ideally, we would try to do it in that area in between the two soccer fields. There would be very little to no disruption of those two
Okay.
fields.
Sounds like the better solution.
Yeah. I think that that's really probably where we're leaning right now, to be honest with you. Bob, did you have a question?
Yeah, there's no consideration of the pipeline underneath?
They know, you know,
They
that's,
know-
they know it's there,
Okay.
on-site knows that they, you know, that's gonna,
All right.
you know, they're using Dig Safe and, I mean, whatever they have to do to go around
Okay.
that, but, yeah, that's not something to fool around with, that's for sure.
What pipeline is that?
There's a huge gas pipeline, Tennessee gas
Tennessee gas
pipeline that runs right through the athletic fields. It comes in between behind the tennis courts where the lacrosse
Okay,
field is. And then it's right up, the reason there's a retaining wall where the football field is because on the other side of that retaining wall is where the gas pipeline is. And then it goes all the way up to Green Road and 495, and then I think it takes the south bend, but, you know, as long as they can do it, it's not gonna be a problem then.
So I think from our end right now, we'll wait and see what Bob brings to the school committee on the 29th. We'll see what the school committee does with whatever they're going to do or not do, and then we'll be back in the position to say, okay, so what are our next steps? So that's kind of where it sits tonight.
Okay.
Any further questions?
My colleagues have any
No?
other questions on this?
I just wanna add, we have a deadline of September 1st from DEP,
Oh, yeah, that was,
so, you know,
To get it done.
Yeah.
yeah, so the clock is ticking.
so it has to be done, or just even in design phase, or?
I think they would really like to have it done, to be honest with you. And I remember actually Don Lowe bringing this up to me, I think that was as soon as I first entered into the school district. So this is, what you're seeing tonight is a series of different events that have led up to the final documentation that we're able to sit here and say, now these are our alternatives that are sitting before us
Okay.
right now.
Have you any estimate of if the day you say go, what the elapsed time is to have it done?
I don't know a timeline as far as how long a project would take, but, you know, obviously there's permitting processes, you know, and going out to bid for contractors. So, you know, get that part done and then, you know, hoping, you know, they can get it done in the summer, you know,
Right,
once
right,
school
right.
is out. So, you know, as soon as the kids get out of school, we'll get right in there and start at it.
And I think too, the fact that we have been in regular communication with DEP, we haven't walked away, we haven't been negligent at all, we've been very responsive. So I think that, I feel good about the level of response that we've had with them and working with them.
All right, let me ask the obvious next question then. If it's at the high end, it's around 185, where's that gonna come from?
I don't.
A third from you,
I-
a third from me.
I don't think I would wanna even entertain that right now. I will tell, I mean, for our purposes, for the purpose of saying this is a project that has to get done, we're actually building that number into our budget, but that's not meaning that that's where, it's just saying the reality is it's gotta come from somewhere. So at
So
this
that-
moment in time, we actually have a budget line. But
So that
that
would-
doesn't mean that it's we're
Okay.
looking at it coming from our budget.
So it would be a factor to be recognized when we're looking at town meetings
Town
come
meeting
May.
probably, that's what I would think.
And that means that you can't make payments on it until July 1st anyway. But that would still,
But that's probably still in the time frame that we're
Yeah.
looking at.
okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rob.
Thanks. Yep.
Those are the only three items that we had on our agenda. And I guess it gets back to just discussing agenda items for next time, which is always allowable anyway. And the question then would become, what is next time? And I'm gonna ask Stan to comment on this in a minute, because we had something in mind in particular for a December meeting. But I'll let him address that aspect of it. But with the holiday season coming up, and unless, let me just throw out, does it make sense to look at waiting until January to have our next meeting? I'm not saying I'm in favor of it or not, but thoughts from any of you?
I think it's gotta be agenda-driven.
Yeah.
I think so too. I mean, right now, I can't think of anything that's critical that we have to talk about next month, and where, you know, after that, it's gonna be budget, so, I mean, I think we can wait unless something pops up, and we can always, all we need is 48 hours. But,
Yeah, I had offered the last meeting, we were talking about tentative places, who's gonna host what. And I was hoping that our project in Lancaster, the Prescott building, would have been completed. In conversation with the super yesterday there, he still thinks that we're gonna be in by the end of December, the end of next month. There's always inherent delays, so it's gonna be nice, and we'd love to be able to host one of the first meetings there with this group, but it's gonna be safer call for January. And I just plan to, in advance of that, ask Don to bring the apple juice in, and Brian's daughter to bring the cookies for that, just give ample notice. So that would be
Be
sometime
your
in
budget
January.
item next time.
So if that works, but as I said, if something comes up,
yeah, I think we can wait till January.
we still have problems too at the Lancaster Community Center. I'm sure Kathy's aware of it too, that a transformer blew about 2 weeks ago now. And we got a 60-year-old transformer that's gotta be replaced. But to get to that, you have to trench, you have to connect now, what is the new building with the old building, you have to get permits. It's been a mess. We're still 2 weeks away, possibly 3, before we get heat. So it's been winterized already. There's no activity going on there, unfortunately, and there's a lot of activity going on in town. So we're doing our best just to get it displaced other places, but it's not an ideal situation, but it's gotta be done right the first time. That's a long
Okay.
answer,
That's
but
fine.
January would be happy.
So I just take it, it's the sense of everybody that's here is, obviously, if something comes up, that we should have this kind of discussion around, and again, I find this very helpful, and on a recurring basis, but let's just leave it that it's the call of the chair of Lancaster will be hosting next time,
Sure.
and so it's.
Might be hosting it in Stow again, but, it'll be hosting,
I'm sure we can accommodate it, if need be. Anything else?
So what would do you mind, what would the date be of the next meeting?
We try to do the first week, but it never seems to work out that way, because then obviously we've got to work off of your schedule.
So we have a school committee meeting on January 3rd. We could do the 10th if you wanted to keep it on a Wednesday.
Tuesdays are not good because they conflict with too many of our
And
selectmen.
Bolton's got Thursday selectmen meetings.
That 10th works.
And we have Mondays.
And ours Tuesday. So,
So Wednesday is it?
That's it.
Wednesday's it.
process of elimination, how
Done.
about that?
So it would be January 10th then?
Yep.
Because we can't do the 3rd, we've got school committee.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's accommodated. Yeah.
Perfect,
All right,
thank you.
so,
Just send me a note if I remember.
We'll have Lita do that.
okay. All right, well, thank you, everybody, and again, yes, Brian.
Mr. Treasurer, Chair, with your permission, wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes,
Yes.
and good luck to the chieftains
Yes.
Good luck to the
Yes.
chieftains.
in a couple of weeks. Okay. If we want to be formal,
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
second? Non-debatable. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.